welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by the 11th Plague of Egypt. It's Mr. Matt Friedman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, pretty good. I'm just part of a natural series of disasters, or maybe I'm the hand of God. Hard to say.
It's one or the other, unfortunately. It can't be both. This week on the show, our series Deconstructing the Films of Sir Ridley Scott continue with the director's 22nd feature film. We're talking about 2014's Exodus, Gods and Kings, which is certainly a movie.
It is certainly one of the films that Ridley Scott made, yes.
It is one of the 29 or so films that Ridley Scott has made. So we're going to be talking all about Exodus, God and Kings, and we're going to try to see what, if anything, this tells us about Ridley Scott as a filmmaker. And then, Matt, I wanted to wrap up the episode with another episode of our new recurring segment, Nobody Knows What They're Doing, because you'll never believe this, Matt. There's some more examples of nobody in the world of entertainment knowing what they're doing.
Oh, that doesn't sound like show business.
There's some things going on over at HBO Max that we just got to talk about.
All right,
but first, let's get into Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Moses, Ramesses, you grew up together, close as brothers. Keep each other safe. Always.
You know something's wrong. You've always felt it. Your parents never told you the truth. What truth? The year of your birth, there was a prophecy that our leader would be born to liberate us. That leader is you, Moses.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
The defiant leader Moses rises up against Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, setting 600,000 slaves on a monumental journey of escape from Egypt and its terrifying cycle of deadly plagues.
This movie was written by Adam Cooper, Bill Coolidge, and Jeffrey Kane. 3 people. It was directed by Ridley Scott, of course, and it stars Christian Bale, Joel Edgerton, and Sir Ben Kingsley, along with a whole host of other people that show up for 5 minutes for some reason, like Aaron Paul and Sigourney Weaver, who are definitely in this movie, sort of say like maybe a couple lines each, and then we move on.
We've even got the woman from Prometheus in there for a minute.
You know, that's not her, but I
really?
thought it was.
Seriously?
Yeah, I was absolutely convinced that was Numi Rapace.
I would have bet $1 million.
Exactly like her.
Wow.
Anyway,
okay.
we're being very lighthearted about this movie, and I think that's because we didn't particularly care for it. But Matt, what did you think of Exodus, God and Kings?
This is just another adaptation of the Exodus story. It's I guess there's a few interesting things that it's trying to do that we'll probably talk about, and I guess they're interesting in the sense that they're unique and other movies haven't done it quite this way. But I think there's a reason why other movies haven't done it quite this way. I thought the performances were between bad and fine. Probably the best thing this has going for it is it's got some pretty cool effect sequences, which is I think counts as damning with faint praise.
Yeah, I'm digging deep to find things to talk about this movie that I enjoy. I agree with you on this one. I think I messaged you this earlier today that I am absolutely confounded. This project is supposed to be about us understanding who this man is as a person and a filmmaker by watching all of his movies and diving deep into them, deconstructing them, if you will. And we are on movie number 22, and I have no fucking clue who this guy is and what drives him and what he wants to talk about anymore. I give up. I'm throwing in the towel. I don't understand how a man makes a movie like The Counselor a year before this movie, and they're both made by the same people, the same person that has the same drive and same artist. I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
I definitely share your bafflement to a degree. I mean, I think this is another of his, historical epic films, right?
Sure.
So there's definitely like patterns. It's just, I don't really see how the patterns hang together as a whole, So
I don't either. And I'm going to quote another critic for this, because I thought they phrased it perfectly. It was Christy Lemire over at RogerEbert.com, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she basically says that Ridley Scott takes the story of Exodus and does not reinvent the wheel. Rather, he invents the biggest, shiniest, noisiest wheel possible and then runs us over with it. And I think that's the perfect way of describing this movie. It is, with the exception of I think the couple of things you and I have to talk about that the story does do differently, it is very much a bog standard version of the story of Passover and the Exodus and all these things, and the Moses story we've all been hearing about since we were 5 years old. And it's really not new. Like, this is not like what he did with Robin Hood, right? Where he was like, I'm going to take the myth of Robin Hood and I'm going to kind of like try to pick away the myth and find the kernel of truth at the center of that story and try to bring it down to earth a little bit. That's not this movie. This is very much a movie that is living within the mythology of the story of Moses. And I guess that's okay. I don't know. It doesn't work for me, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, so I agree, but at the same time, the movie does the absolutely weird choice of sort of throwing into question whether Moses is just an insane man who's hallucinating because he hit his head, and the plagues of Egypt are actually just a natural occurrence that's all precipitated by some, disturbance happening in the Nile, leading to, basically a sort of red tide, natural, series of plagues that are actually just second order consequences of one weird thing happening with the Nile, and the movie then never really quite resolving the question of like, was it God or was it like
Yeah.
which is such a weird choice to do in a, because it's like, what are we saying? What is the point?
Yeah.
Like, 'cause it's not a story that's trying to undermine. This isn't like a scathing atheistic indictment of the idea of taking the Exodus myth seriously.
No.
This is like, all of the moral lessons are exactly the same as any other, as the Charlton Heston adaptation or any other adaptation, except you have the element that maybe it's all in Moses's head.
It's such a weird choice, because you're absolutely right. The movie kind of bends over backwards to show you, like, it's not just that the Nile suddenly turns red one morning. It's that suddenly a bunch of alligators or crocodiles show up, and the crocodiles just go ballistic and start killing everything that moves, and that seeps blood into the Nile, which dyes the entire river red, right? So we have a realistic excuse here, and we even have an Egyptian scientist character kind of walking us through how one natural event could lead to another, to explain away some of these plagues. Unfortunately, the way the 10 plagues of Egypt work is you eventually get to a point where they're inexplicable almost by design. And so because in the world that you're right that Moses is just hallucinating this child that is representing God, and none of this is actually happening, how do we explain
the final plague,
born, the death of every,
right.
I mean, unless Moses himself was like running around Egypt murdering children all night, which I wouldn't put it past him in this movie, but that you can't explain that one away. And that's if you're going to try to do this, like, well, actually this might not have been God story, you can't do that. And it really, Scott's not trying to do that. He just like sprinkles that in to make us go, huh? We show Aaron Paul like looking at Moses speaking to someone, to God, and this moment of, oh, he thinks he's just crazy. It's like, why are we doing that? Why are we introducing that into this film?
Yeah, no answer here. I have no clever rejoinder to you. You're totally right that the fact of, and the inclusion of the final plague where all the firstborn children die is shown like to be a supernatural event, and so you're like, oh, okay, so I guess it is God. But then even after that point, when they cross the Red Sea, it's like, oh, it's It's basically just low tide, except then it comes in as like a massive tidal wave, and so you're like, wait,
are frustrating part. Like they build it up to make it like there's plenty of versions of Moses parts the Red Sea that have like shown, like he slams his staff down and you like see the waters like suddenly and quickly like push to the side, and as they walk across the floor of the sea, there's these giant walls of water just hovering on each side. And then you have this one where Moses just wakes up in the morning and it just looks like it's low tide. And it was like, oh, okay. But then you're absolutely right. We go from there to a giant wall of water rushing towards them with tornadoes everywhere. And it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways.
God in the movie is depicted as a kind of rageful, incompetent demiurge who,
I mean, he's played by a 5-year-old child, which I think is the perfect physical manifestation of the emotions of what this movie wants God to be, is like a petulant, angry 5-year-old who isn't getting his way and is very frustrated about it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because there's even a scene, and maybe this is like somehow biblical, but if it is, I'm not aware of it, where Moses is like, why are we doing it this way? Like, why? and God is basically like, this is about revenge for 400 years of slavery. And Moses, like the character of Moses in the movie even is like, revenge? Like, can't we, like, let's just get out of here. Like, just help us get free.
I mean, it's so weird, right? Because like God approaches Moses and he's impatient. He's like, you're not, like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm fighting to free the slaves. And he's like, you're not going fast enough. And Moses is like, after 400 years, suddenly you're impatient. And the movie introduces these facts and then does it, like, why introduce that like make people think about this concept if you're not going to actually do anything with it? It's so weird to me because like the push and pull between God and Moses is, I think, supposed to be the through line of this film, is supposed to be the main driving factor, because you have this guy who starts off is basically atheistic, right? Like even when he thinks he's an Egyptian, he is basically calling the Egyptian gods nonsense and praying to them. And the one priestess we see at the beginning of the movie, he says to Ramesses, the first thing you do when you're in charge is going to be firing that woman, right? Because it's fucking nonsense what she's doing. So he basically starts off atheistic and then has this the burning bush moment and is just kind of but which we got to talk about Christian Bale at some point, but the turn from him being an atheist who believes this is all nonsense to him extremely buying into his encounter with child God in front of the burning bush, I felt like we could have dramatized that turn just a little bit more instead of just like it felt like just a switch flipped. And I think I just wanted more there. And maybe I'll put all that on Christian Bale and his terrible performance.
Yeah, let's do that now, because everything we've talked about in this conversation up till now, I think could have been fine, and you and I could be having a totally different conversation if Christian Bale had not been the absolute worst of his entire career.
Yeah,
by far. Like I like Christian Bale a lot. He's American Psycho, Empire of the Sun. When he was a kid, he was fantastic. I even liked his Batman, for goodness sake. But in this movie, it's bizarre. It's borderline experimental is what it is.
He's so detached. He's so rigid. I never once in my life bought into any of the emotion that he's trying to convey on the screen. It's terrible. It's terrible.
It's just confusing. Like there's so many different Moseses that he's like. There's him, like you said. There's the Moses we meet at the beginning, and then there's like he's sort of a different character when he's like wandering the desert, and then he's a different character when he's with his wife, and then he's a different character when he's trying to be the general, and then he's a different character when he's trying to be the prophet, and sometimes sometimes there's just like individual isolated scenes where it's almost like he's just on take 14 and he's just trying something weird that maybe he doesn't even think is going to work. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Where like there's certain scenes where he's just he's just being weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah,
Like,
one of those, well, let's just try it this way moments, and then that's the take that they pick for the movie.
yeah,
It's so weird, and to be as charitable to this performance as I possibly can, the script is not doing him any favors at all, because I think the way the movie chooses to start is very damaging to it. I think we start kind of in media res with both Moses and Ramesses grown up adults who have this established relationship. This is one thing, by the way, that I think the cartoon Gods of Egypt, I think it was called, does a much better job on, that we get to understand the relationship between these two men. We see them as boys, we see them grow up together, we see their bond, and we see, and it takes this kind of war between the Hebrews and the Egyptians, and it personalizes it. It makes it about these two people. And in this movie, you get none of that. Like, they seem to not like the moment we meet Ramesses really is him suddenly thinking, because of some stupid prophecy, that his brother or cousin, but like brother, like basically they grew up together, is going to supplant him, and so you immediately are mistrusting of that. And it's like, why did you do it that way? Like, why don't we see them as friends first, and then see how because this is a good story, right? Like, that's the story of Exodus. This story, whether you believe in it or not, is just a good fucking story. It's a classic fucking story. It's this idea of this guy who didn't know what he was, and he has this familial relationship with the ruler of the Egyptians that are subjugating his people, and he finds out about it, and it destroys him, and he's like forced, whether by God or by his own conscience, to do something about it. And it's just a great fucking story. And it seems like the choices here were like removing all the greatest, most dramatic parts of it. Like at the end, when I think it's Christian Bale says to Ramesses, like, this isn't about you and me. And I was like, no, but it should be a little bit. Like, in a movie, it should be.
I agree. Yeah.
Sorry, I went on for a while there. I'm so fucking confounded by this movie.
Yeah, no, it definitely takes what should be all of the actual human drama out of the movie. This is, interestingly, this is a kind of a Robot Ripley movie, actually.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
I just said Ridley, but yeah, because it's taking all of the human drama out of a story which actually has a lot of natural human drama to it, and doing it weird where there is human drama, where you've got like these bizarre Ben Kingsley scenes where there's just no dramatic weight to it, and you're like, who is this guy? Why do I care? He's not in the movie anymore. Basically, okay, we're done with that. And then focusing all of its runtime and all of its energy as a film on basically like effect sequences of the plagues, and like really cool, like sort of objectively cool and dramatic, like visually dramatic, sweeping shots of the Egyptian city and the slave quarters, and it all feels very visually cool and epic. Can't really complain about the visuals, actually.
No.
But like, it's Ridley Scott, again, like you just said, confounds me, because in a movie like a Gladiator, you understand, like, he clearly understands that the amazing effects are in service to and framing the human story that he's telling. And that's generally true with him. And then there's a movie like this that comes along where there just kind of is no human story. I mean, I think that this is one of those cases where maybe we blame the writers, or we ask the question, why do you need 3 writers to write a script based on the story of Exodus, which is the most retold story ever?
That's true. That's so true. Yeah, I would love to blame the writers. I don't think I fully can, because Ridley Scott continues to pick these projects, but it's just, I mean, at every level, it's just a mess of a film. Like the handmaiden character, or the servant character that we learn is Moses' sister, right? This is his sister, who has been posing as a servant for her entire life. The first time we meet her, and the first time we meet Moses' mother, is at the scene where they're being accused of actually being Hebrew and they're lying. Like, that's the first moment we meet these people, that dramatic moment, and who are like, who is this? Why would Moses risk his life or tell or reveal the truth to save this random woman he's just learned is his sister? Like, why would you do it that way?
Yeah. It's classic don't do it this way screenwriting, where it's like well, how do we know Moses cares about them? Because we're telling you. We're literally have actual lines where we say, this is such and such, his nursemaid from birth, and you're like, okay, you've just told me this information, and now we're already escalating to, oh, now she's out of the movie.
Yeah,
like
she disappeared. His mother, I think, says 2 lines.
The
entire movie, which is just absolutely wild to me.
I mean, that's his mother, and then like Aaron Paul's in this movie, and I don't even know who he is.
He's Joshua, Matt, obviously.
But who is he in relation to Moses? Is he just like some guy? He's just a guy. But like, okay, why? Why is he the guy who is Moses's right-hand guy? Does he trust him for some? I mean, I guess there was the moment when he saw him getting whipped, and that was it. That was like, there's no relationships in the movie,
which is wild to me because it's a 2 hour and 30-minute movie. You know, like you would think in a movie this long about a story that is so well trodden and so well known that we would spend a lot of screen time getting to know these characters, but we spend an exorbitant amount of time with Moses wandering through the desert. We spend an exorbitant amount of time with the Hebrews flight across the desert, and then Ramesses' reversal and like we spend so much time like cutting between scenes of them walking and then Ramesses in chariots. And like, again, I have to be like, everybody knows this fucking story. Everybody knows they're going to catch up to them at the Red Sea. Like, do we have to spend all that time on that moment? Can't we take some of this runtime and tell me who Joshua is and what he wants, and maybe even build in a little conflict with him and Moses? Like, this is one thing that is potentially really cool here. The idea that this guy Moses comes in and he's spent his life as an Egyptian general, and now suddenly he's coming to these people and saying, I'm one of you and I'm going to lead you. Like, that's conflict, right? That's natural conflict that we can use. And the movie kind of wants to do it, but it just doesn't ever expound on the characters enough to actually do it.
No, it's so shy of that. And you can even almost see where they might have thought about that in the script in some draft, because you've got like one line where like his brother is like, so you are the great Moses, and then it's entirely dropped, never referred to again. The Pharaoh also, like there's some stuff going on with the Pharaoh and his life. Like I always found with like the Charlton Heston adaptation, which I think is my current favorite adaptation, although I haven't seen it since I was a literal child.
Just for the people, you're talking about the Ten Commandments, the
Ten Commandments,
Cecil B. DeMille version of this.
Yes. I always liked how thoroughly characterized the Pharaoh. I mean, it's funny, I just call him Pharaoh, even though, even in that movie, he's allegedly Ramesses. But
which is something I learned while researching this movie is actually like the biblical story of Exodus just refers to him as the Pharaoh. We don't actually know which Pharaoh it's supposed to be, and I think it's just at some point it was kind of decided that Ramesses II is the most likely person, just by the timeline of when Moses was supposedly alive. Although apparently, there's no, outside of the Bible itself, there's no written account that there ever was a person. So there's a lot of gray area around this. But yes, it's supposedly Ramesses.
Right. But I always liked the characterization of Ramesses in that adaptation, even in like the cartoon adaptation. It was very thin. It wasn't horrible. I mean, honestly, I think I prefer kind of the Pharaoh storyline to the Moses storyline, just because the Moses storyline was so stupid and chaotic. But still, it wasn't it wasn't good. I wouldn't say it was good either.
I liked it. Okay. I think it's probably outside of the visuals of the plagues, like you were talking about. I think Joel Edgerton's work here is probably my favorite part of the movie, because I think it is the closest. Like we actually take the time here. I loved the moment where he wakes up in the middle of the night and goes over to his baby son, his infant son, and that line that the script uses later down the line was like, why you sleep so soundly? It's because you know how much you are loved. That thing. And then
Yeah.
he gets to repeat that line again after the death of his son, which is oh, like, which again, what do you want me to think, movie? This is the weird thing about doing the Exodus story in modern times, Matt. We want to attach the modern Jewish and Christian version of God to an Old Testament version of God, and we can't do that, because the Old Testament version of God is the one that I think very closely matches this petulant 5-year-old angry child that we see representing him.
Yeah.
And so like the movie wants you to feel bad for Ramesses. Like and maybe this is just me, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, but like it got to me when he's holding the corpse of his child, his baby child, and he brings that when he confronts Moses, he brings the body with him, and I'm just like, that really fucked me up. And I'm like, what do you want me to think about that? Because that is like, I understand, like slavery is terrible and awful, and like obviously any kind of subjugation of people is awful, and I don't like that. I don't like that last plague. I don't like that. I don't like that. That's the thing we're doing, is we're going to kill children now. I'm not a big fan of that. So
Yeah.
what do you want me to feel about this movie? I don't know, and I don't know the answer to that.
I think this movie made me think, if anything, more critically about like the approach that God is taking in the story, because you begin to ask yourself, like, why do it this way? Why do it in this way that is basically almost entirely able to be hand waved away as a natural series of occurrences? Why not just have all of the crops suddenly turn into snakes and slither away, or have the Pharaoh and his entire family just be possessed and say that the slaves are free, and then the slaves leave, and it's like, well, the movie sort of actually provides an answer, which is God wants the Egyptians to suffer. God just wants them to suffer for what for keeping their thumb on the Hebrews for so long.
And I actually think this is biblically accurate, right? Because the one thing I told you about this earlier, in Exodus, it says that after the Hebrews are freed and the Jewish people are leaving to go to Canaan, God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Like the Pharaoh is sitting there mourning the death of his son, and God hardens his heart to this, and which is what causes Pharaoh to change his mind, which is what causes Pharaoh to gather his troops and chase after them and eventually drown in the Red Sea. That's God being like, no, I'm not done with you yet, man. You don't get to just let them go and then live out your life. I'm gonna drown your entire army. Like that's vengeful. That's anger. That's Old Testament shit right there.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that does match, but then you're absolutely right. We sprinkle in the modernity of it, and that's when it starts to get a little like, oh, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think honestly, the only way that I can take the movie is to just literally take the character of God in this movie as like I said earlier, a sort of petulant demiurge who is not really the all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God of the more modern conception. It's like, no, this is a God, I think it's biblically, the part in the Charlton Heston the Ten Commandments film, where the Egyptians and the Egyptian wizards basically have like staffs that can turn into snakes, and then and then Moses' staff turns into a snake and kills their snake staffs.
Yeah,
I think that's in the Bible, right?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Well, it might not be, but I think it is though. But like the point of it is, like in the milieu of this story, magic is real, and it's not only under God's purview.
Mhm.
Like the Egyptian gods can also make staffs turn into snakes magically.
Yeah.
It's just that God is stronger.
Yeah, the
And
Abrahamic God is better, stronger.
yeah, yeah, and when he says, the commandments don't say you shall not believe in any other gods. The commandments say you shall worship no other gods before me. You're allowed to. The other gods certainly exist, right? That's biblical, actually. In that story, in the context of that story, the other gods clearly exist, and so it's just what of this movie wants me to be thinking, and what I'm just sort of deciding I'm gonna have to think to getting enjoyment out of this. I don't know.
I think it just the big it should have just picked a lane, just decide, just like what. And I think part of this is like, you don't want to offend people. This is a story that's immensely important to a very large amount of people, right? And so you don't want to step on people's toes. You don't want to offend. You want to tell the story. I was about to say accurately, but we don't know accurately to the way it's written, I guess, but also put your own spin on it and try to humanize it and modernize it a little bit. And you end up doing kind of all things at once. And yeah, it just doesn't function on any level, except for, you're absolutely right. The plague section is very pretty. It's very effective. Like the Ridley Scott, like I think some of my favorite sequences where, when the slaves have been freed and are heading towards the Red Sea, and Ridley like pulls back, and we just see the sheer number of these people, right? Like I think your thing said 600,000, which seems like too many. I don't know if that many people were gathering in 200 BC or whenever this was, or 2000 BC, wasn't it? Jesus.
Yeah. And furthermore, how they would survive this journey when they would run out of food, and then there's basically no way to just like forage enough food for that many people. It doesn't really.
But still, like the way the movie shows the scope of it and the breadth of it, and you realize, like, in that sequence where we're cutting back and forth between Ramesses and his people chasing after them, like, which again, we only had to, you get it after the first time, but like there's this great mass of people, and they're moving very slowly because it's just people. It's just like people living their lives and like going on this journey, and they're almost all on foot versus these incredibly fast moving chariots. And it's like it really helps sell the kind of fear of, if they catch these people, they're going to slaughter all of them. This giant mass of people are going to be slaughtered. So that's very effective. So a lot of the filmmaking on display here, very, really, really effective.
Yeah, sure. I one scene along that sequence that got me was like the chariots racing along these narrow mountain passes, and like, despite the fact that I don't care too much about the characters actually at this point, it's still rather hair raising, because you've got like the chariot wheels keep almost falling off the edge, and they just play with this tension for a while, and then finally one of them does fall over the edge, and then it causes this rather drawn out, but I think effectively drawn out sequence of like more and more of the chariots piling up, and then the impact dislodging like the rock itself, and then just like the whole face of the mountain falls away, and you just watch like thousands of chariots crushed to death, and leaving like Ramesses and a tiny fraction of his force left alive.
And we get to see Ben Mendelsohn get his comeuppance too. Who played the I forget what he was, but he's the guy that was managing the slaves at the beginning of the movie.
The viceroy.
Yeah, that despicable asshole we get to see. The movie takes time to show him get run over by a chariot. Yeah. The thing that I love about that sequence is one of the few moments where I think Ridley does some really creative character work. We do see everyone else around him is like terrified, right? Is like watching as these chariot wheels are right on the edge. And then we cut to this really interesting overhead shot of Ramesses, who is sitting on like the side kind of I don't know what to call it, but outcropping of the chariot, and it's like it's over it's like extends beyond the wheel, and so it's like over the drop, and he's just like casually, like with no emotion on his face, like just chilling there. And it's just like he's not afraid at all because he's so mindlessly driven towards this one thing at this point. I thought that was some really effective storytelling, and I wish the movie had done stuff like that way more.
Yeah, it's interesting because the you could almost spin it as a criticism to say like, oh, he just looks like he's standing there in a soundstage with a bunch of CGI happening around him. But like when you're in that moment, it's like, well, he looks like he's just peacefully gliding through the scene because he's not even aware
Yeah.
of all of the chaos and danger around him. He's so
Mhm.
single-mindedly focused on what's ahead.
Yep. It's very well done. Again, one of the few bits of this movie that is very well done.
Yeah.
I feel like we've only been going for like 35 minutes, but I'm already running out of things to talk about here, just because there's just not a lot. There's just not a lot of good here.
Yeah, it's just so stretched out. It's just so
Mhm.
long. There's a whole I mean, I don't have much to say about it, but like there's a whole long like what, maybe 20-minute sequence where he takes shelter with this family and
Mhm.
gets married and has a kid and has a whole life, becomes a shepherd, goes up the mountain, sees God for the first time, then he has to go back to his wife
Mhm.
and have arguments with her, and it's like, oh my god, this is I mean, that might have been actually some of the better stuff in the movie, even though I still don't think it's great because Christian Bale's really bad for some reason.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
shame because everyone like around him is pretty good. Like the woman who plays
mhm.
his wife, I think, does a very good job. But yeah, he's just kind of a piece of poop in the middle of the scene.
He's actually kind of like creepy and weird in those sequences. But yeah, like that's why it's so long. Is it's got these detours that don't even go anywhere. Another detour would be the sequence where you think like, oh, are we going a different direction with this movie? Is he going to actually be like, a Maximus like figure who teaches the Hebrews to be warriors so they can actually have like a real slave revolt and just
That
escape?
was
And
so weird.
we're going to skip the plague. And no, none of that. God came and told them to forget about all that shit. We're doing the plagues now, and we just don't ever return to it. We don't ever
So many
return to that
sequences of
idea.
him teaching people how to use bows that just
Hmm.
don't go anywhere ever.
Yeah, there are
Like,
so
and
many
then
little meanders.
and then you think that they're like, we're setting up this big conflict in the parted Red Sea, where you got the Moses' army on the one side and the Pharaoh's army on the other side, and they're like charging like, oh, we're gonna do like a battle here. This is gonna be, and I don't know if that's the correct choice for the story. It's certainly not like what was in the story in the Bible, but like, okay, we're doing something interesting here. And then no, both armies just kind of peel off, and then we're like, oh, so we're like not going to do like a big like army versus army battle, but we're going to do like a Moses and Pharaoh duel, with their swords, those twin swords. They're going to have this duel as the Red Sea crashes around them. And no, they just stand there. The water hits them, and that's
Uh-huh.
it.
And hits them and then safely carries them back to their respective
Back to
sides
their
of the
respective
ocean,
side. I mean,
which
when
I,
God
yeah,
wants to do something
I'm fine with that
himself, he
actually.
does
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
um,
you're right. It's so weird. The one thing I will say again, talking about like the way that this movie introduces concepts and then goes and nowhere with it. That sequence that you were talking about, where he has his wife and his kid. A couple things about it that I want to say. The first is that I kind of hated how the movie framed his falling in love with these people in this way of life as just him falling in love with this woman. I
mhm.
wish we had seen more scenes of him just like learning to appreciate this simple life outside of his kind of borderline creepy interest in her. I don't think that was great. But the part that I really liked is when she is this very religious person, right, who believes in these things, and is kind of frustrated at him for confusing his son by like speaking frankly and atheistically, I guess, about belief in gods. And then he goes through his experience, and then, God has called me to go do this, and she says to him, what kind of God would make a man abandon his family? And she says, uh he doesn't know, and she's like, that's what faith is, and I would gladly trade mine to keep you here. And that's a cool idea, right? That's, again,
Mhm.
this cool, we're introducing this idea of what, and I think that's a line that Ramesses repeats a little bit later, is what kind of God would kill all these children. And the movie just kind of goes, well, it's just this one,
Mhm.
that I don't have
Yeah.
anything else for you, this one, the end.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
just like, again, what do you, what do you want me to feel like in that final moment where we see an old Moses, an old man, carrying the 10 commandments and the thing, and he looks out and he sees the kid again walking with them and smiling at him? What do you want me to feel about this God? What do you want me to feel about this God as Moses chisels the 10 commandments and says, I'm only doing this because I agree with it. I wouldn't do this if I didn't. I'm not just gonna, do what you command. What? What? What do we do? What are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Yeah. You can hear the voices of the three writers disagreeing about what the movie is actually supposed to be
I
about.
think I
And
think that's such a good point. I think that's such a good point, that you have three people coming in, and importantly, when I read the writers' names, I said "and," but in the credits there's no "and" between them, and what that means is they did not write it together. If there's an
uh-huh.
ampersand between them, that means they wrote it together. This basically means three different writers worked on this script at different times. And I think you're right. That's where the uncertainty and the kind of thematic confusion comes
Yeah.
from.
No, I really do think that maybe each of these people had just totally different ideas about where they wanted things to go, and then they were basically disrespectful of whatever ideas were there before they got there, and so they just ended up butchered. Um,
Mhm.
I agree. There's not. I don't really have much more to say. Honestly, it's a weird movie, and it's a great example of how Ridley should really not make movies with shitty scripts.
Yeah.
Remember when Pharaoh rides chariots for 4 days straight? Um,
Yeah. They
I,
don't rest the horses at all.
they don't they don't appear to sleep for
No,
four
nobody
days.
sleeps.
They just ride horses for 4 days. I don't know. Maybe that's a stupid nitpick, I guess, but like the way the language of film shows it is as if they are riding on horses for 4 days, which is not
Mhm.
physically realistic. So that's all. That's my complaint.
One fun thing is I don't know where you rented this, but I rented it from Prime. And when you watch Prime on your web browser, it has these like kind of pop-up video things that appear on the side that like have further information about the scenes. And this one had a lot of uh historical inaccuracies that were popping up. A lot
Uh-huh.
of this is like, and I'm prefacing this with, I don't think this truly matters in a larger sense. Like, I think if this movie was not poorly written, if it was well written but had a bunch of historical inaccuracies, it would be a good movie, and I wouldn't care
Mhm.
about this. But like, so many things. Like at the beginning, we see the priestess like read entrails, decide what happens in the oncoming battle with the Hittites, and the thing pops up, and it was like, reading entrails was not an Egyptian custom. It's like, and then like when Pharaoh gives the two swords to Ramesses and Noah, it was like, these swords are not correct. The Egyptians used curved blades, and adorning your weapons with leafing was done in Northern Europe and did not exist. It's just like all this, like, it's just like the movie is chock full of just really, you know, I think there's a lot of attention to detail in this movie, and I think that, once again, production design wise, I think Ridley Scott does a very good job. But it's all anachronistic and wrong, basically, which is really hilarious.
That's great. I wasn't aware of any of that, but it's again, it's the kind of thing where I wouldn't care at all, except because the movie's bad. Now we can laugh at it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not the primary problem with the movie, but it is one of them, which I think brings us to maybe the thing we can finish on, because I think we have to address it a little bit. I don't have too much to say about it, because obviously the thing we talked about a couple weeks ago is that one of the big things with this movie is that this is one of the movies that brought the concept of whitewashing in our storytelling to the fore once again. It's not the first time it's been brought, but this is like one of the ones that started this big movement, because my God, when you look at this cast, nobody playing a Jewish person is Jewish. Nobody playing an Egyptian person is even Middle Eastern. Like, I'm pretty sure Joel Edgerton was like born in, I think he's Welsh, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously Ben Kingsley is, English, but Indian, as well. Like Sigourney Weaver, pretty sure was born in New York.
There are at least some extras, like the soldiers that appear to be, and that's the thing, is it's like I don't know, they never speak. It's so lazy in that way. Yeah, it's particularly bad.
Yeah, and I think Christian Bale is Welsh. So the Jewish Moses and the Egyptian Pharaoh, both from Wales. This is great. And the thing about this, I was thinking about this a lot today, because I think in the broad cultural connotation of what we should and shouldn't be doing when we tell these types of stories, was this casting bad? And I think the answer to that is clearly yes, right? But I guess the larger question, like when we're zooming in specifically to this movie and just this movie, was the casting bad? And like, I don't know. I can see, again, I can see why someone cast Joel Edgerton as the role of Ramesses. I can see it. I understand that. I think they were doing a little bit of stunt casting with Ben Kingsley, because Ben Kingsley played Moses in a 90s version of the story. And so they're like, we'll hire him again and he'll be talking to Moses this time. Get it? It's fun. I can see reasoning behind some of the choices. And like, if Christian Bale was wonderful, and if Joel Edgerton was perfect, and if every other problem with this movie was fixed, I would happily call this a good movie, and also say it's a movie in which maybe we should rethink how we choose to cast stories like this. But this one actually works. And maybe it's because this was a bad movie, a very bad movie, and it had this casting issue that is the reason why these issues with whitewashing that we talk about a lot kind of broke out. Because I think it's very easy to excuse that kind of stuff in a movie that largely works, right? It's like, yeah, we shouldn't have cast Christian Bale as Moses, but he did a great freaking job, man. So maybe this time it was okay, but we need to have a larger conversation about how. But no, we can also say, and he did terrible.
Right.
So it's, I don't know. No, what do you think about that?
No, it's exactly. We had a similar conversation, but it was much shorter, about Gladiator, where we basically said, isn't it kind of silly that this Australian man is playing a Spanish Roman man? Yeah, it is. Haha. And then and then that was it, basically, because who cares? Because Russell Crowe did a great job, and everybody in this movie, everybody in Gladiator was great, despite the fact that, like, obviously it makes no sense in an ethnicity casting sense of.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't even know how to think about these things sometimes, though. But
I don't know what the right answer is here, because like it's so complicated, right? Like, we talk about the Scarlett Johansson casting in Ghost in the Shell, right? Like, that's one of the big whitewashing moments outside of this one, I think, was that one. And it's like, I agree with the sentiment. However, would that movie had been made if it didn't have a name like Scarlett Johansson attached to it, right? And so, like, I think it's sometimes a lot more complex than just, we need to do a better job of casting, which I agree, we do. But but it's a business as well, and it has to operate as a business. Like, perhaps the reason Christian Bale was cast in this movie is because the financiers would not have financed $140 million story like this without a name like Christian Bale at the head. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. The interesting thing about Egypt, and I'm pretty ignorant here, honestly, but Egypt was this sort of region of massive cultural and ethnic flux for thousands and thousands of years. Like
Sure.
it is historically true that like Egypt was ruled by Greeks for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And Egypt
And
is
Romans, yeah.
and Romans, and Egypt is, it's in Africa, but there's just a lot of, it's actually hard to know exactly what ethnicity dominated in Egypt 4,000 years ago, or maybe people do know that, but I don't know. Like I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
Egyptians looked like 4,000 years ago. And maybe the ruling class looked different from the common people 4,000 years ago. But regardless, I doubt that they looked like Christian Bale. So the point stands. It is just kind of interesting that like there's actually room for a sort of interesting like adult conversation about like, well, what even would the appropriate casting, like the historically accurate casting be
Yeah,
for,
you're absolutely
like,
right. Would casting a modern day Egyptian as Ramesses be accurate? I mean, I don't know the answer to that
yeah,
question.
I don't either. I don't know. I'm sure someone knows and they're laughing at us because they know
Yeah, that's
exactly.
very possible.
But like I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think the ancient world is super interesting because I think it was a lot more complex than we we just round things off to like, you learn about ancient Egypt when you're in middle school and then you
Mhm.
don't really think about it much after that. And it's like, no, the ancient world was thousands of years of things happening.
Yeah.
And, and,
I
and,
mean,
you, and you only know a tiny slice of it.
even ancient Egypt as an idea, right, was you know like a bunch of different dynasties that did stuff sometimes very different, right? Like we like to clump Egyptian together as
Hmm.
one thing, and it's not even like it's like
Hmm.
like stylistically and art and faith and all these things, like we like to, oh, it's pyramids and mummies and stuff, and it's like, yes, that's absolutely true, but like it's kind of like with dinosaurs, how we I can't believe I'm about to make this comparison, but like imagine dinosaurs, we imagine all these different dinosaurs living together in the same time, where actually there was millions of years that separate some of the most popular dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Ancient Egypt was a place that was around for a very long time, and there were very different stages of what ancient Egypt was.
Yeah, I think my brother said something like he went on an ancient Egypt kick at some point recently and was like, there were periods in ancient Egypt where basically the pharaohs were sort of just like cosplaying the pharaoh stuff that they saw lying around from 2,000 years previous. Like the reason why they did the beard thing and the headdress thing was because that's what was on the ancient ruins, and
Yeah.
it's like in some sense it's like it's kind of not even their culture anymore. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a mimicry of a culture.
I love that, and it reminds me of the moment in this when Ramesses ascends the throne, where he's got that golden, like,
Hmm.
blocky beard attached to his face, and like again the attention to detail here, like you see the how it's supported on his chin, right? Like it's got
Hmm.
the I don't know what it is, but it's wrapped around his ears, and it's
Yeah.
like that looks kind of ridiculous, and it's like
Mhm.
it is so funny to think that like, oh, we did that because like we have a statue from hundreds of years ago, and the statue has this really pronounced beard. We're like, oh, that's what we're supposed to do. That's what the pharaohs of the first dynasty did. And so in order to really summon my pharaohness, I'm gonna put this ridiculous looking thing on my chin. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna grow and shape a beard like that. I'm just gonna stick this thing on there.
I think that's my favorite thing about his performance as the pharaoh is everything about it is awkward and it's a poor fit,
Yeah.
and he's just really bad at it, and nobody really respects him.
Yeah.
In contrast to his father, um, who just had this amazing gravitas,
Yeah.
and was a great like example of a pharaoh with all this dignity. Although of course he was the one who ordered the murder of all the firstborn of the Hebrews. So
Yeah.
so let's not give him too much credit.
Of course,
But
you're talking about the Pharaoh Seti, played, of course, by the Italian John Turturro.
yeah. Well, Italy's right there, right next to Egypt. That's actually probably the most accurate casting in the film, if you think about it.
Oh my god. Yeah, and I think you're right. And can we talk about how Ridley Scott basically just recreates the scene from Gladiator where the king, pharaoh, Caesar,
Uh-huh.
emperor calls the not son over and tells him
Mhm.
how much more he likes him than the actual son?
Uh-huh. That's great.
Except, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's it's actually it's damaging to the film because it kind of shines a light on its flaws when you see that exact same scene played out in Gladiator and played out with so much more emotion and gravitas, like the relationship between, because that's a movie, Gladiator's a movie that kind of starts in media res too, and we don't really know these characters and the relationship between Maximus and Commodus and um I don't remember.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um that, like, we see that we get like just thrown into that, but we just learn immediately what the complexities of that relationship are, and that compared to this where it's just like nothing, it's the same scene, it's the same kind of emotion in there, like this idea that like the uncertainty and the jealousy, and you maybe understand why Ramesses was so willing to immediately believe the story about Moses's true birth, because of the jealousy, because of the insecurity, because of all these things. I kind of, again, I feel like I'm complaining about the same thing, but we did the prophecy thing and the reason he's concerned about this is the prophecy, and it's like, can't we just like do it through human emotion, like this idea of, outside of the prophecy, you are the future king, and this other guy saved your life, and by doing so kind of betrayed your incompetence a bit, like showed how you are weak and got yourself into a situation where you needed your life to be saved. And that insecurity around that, combined with the fact that your father clearly favors this other person, and if it were not impossible according to the laws and customs of the land, he would make this guy king instead of you. Like,
Yeah.
that's very standard, emotional dramatic stuff, and it doesn't do that. It's just like, oh, there was like a Shakespearean prophecy that causes me to behave ways. It's just boring. It's the
Yeah.
boring way to do it.
Right. It undermines itself at every
Mm-hmm.
turn, because it's like he's not even the one who decides to banish Moses, or
Mm-hmm.
rather, he banishes him as a compromise because his mother is the one who connives to to like get all this stuff revealed, and it's like it's all motivated by his mom, and he's just so weak and passive,
Yeah,
um and just makes him really uninteresting and uncompelling as a
but
as a
again,
villain and just as a character.
none of that was set up though, because like, Ramesses says to his mother, played by Sigourney Weaver, by the way,
Mhm.
incredibly Egyptian Sigourney Weaver,
Yeah.
um, you're just trying to get me to do this because you've always wanted Moses out of here. And like, r- really? Why did she, like, that's the first we're hearing of this, right? Like, it's just nothing's set up,
Yeah.
nothing's like, that like, again, this whole conflict between Ramesses and Moses is just fast forwarded to, and suddenly we have all these people in a room arguing, and like we have her on one side and Moses' mother on the other, and they're arguing against each other. I was like, I've never seen those women interact in my life. Like, you need to lay the groundwork a little bit here before you
Uh-huh.
have this emotional climax of that particular arc of the film, and it's just not there. It's just not
Yeah.
there.
Or think about the idea that you've got um Ramsey's wife and Ramsey's mom are both characters who both do relatively little, but why don't you just make those the same character and have the wife be, obviously the wife and the mother of the son, but then also have the wife be like a sort of Lady Macbeth figure who's jealous of Moses, and then like there's at least some efficiency to the storytelling, but
Hmm.
we just kind of smear things out over multiple characters. That's what I mean about people not having relationships. Is like there's no dynamism to the relate to his relationship with his wife, and there's no dynamism to his relationship with his mother. It's just isolated moments
Yeah.
that are never referred to again or have no
Yep.
implications.
Yeah. To go back to what you said earlier, it's robot Ridley. I don't understand how people emotions work, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna show it, but I'm not gonna, like, like, yeah, this would be an emotional scene, right? This is what you humans do, without understanding how any of that stuff actually plays out.
Yep.
Oh, it's disappointing. Wow. What a film. What a film.
Don't watch it.
Don't
The
it,
end.
so this movie did all right at the box office, by the way. It cost an estimated $140 million and it brought in 268 million. So not great, but not terrible.
Yeah. This we're reaching the part of Ridley Scott's career where I wasn't seeing that many movies anyway, so I did not see
Mhm.
this one in theater either. I can't say that I regret it.
I don't think I did either. I don't remember. I swear I've seen this movie. I don't remember when I did though.
No, I had never seen it before at all, actually. So, oh well.
Did not do well with the critics or the audience. Nope, nobody liked this thing. Nobody liked it.
Yep. It's just
So,
yeah.
and then Matt, in the continual confounding nature that is Ridley Scott, do you know what his next film is?
What's his next film, Scott?
It's The Martian, possibly one of his greatest movies.
Uh-huh. Yeah, one of my favorite of his movies.
Uh-huh.
The one a film that both I and my children love to watch, which is rare. Just Ridley, run your scripts by me
Who
before
are
you
you,
make them.
Mr. Scott? Who are you?
I don't know.
I don't know. Who wrote The Martian, by the way? It's a very well-known writer, right? Yeah, it's Drew Goddard. Okay.
Yeah.
Drew Goddard, who wrote a whole bunch of stuff. Cabin in the Woods. He wrote for Lost, by the way.
One thing I think that we're learning about Ridley, I'm going to just let that pass. One thing that we're learning about Ridley is that he's just a sucker for certain kinds of film, like historical film. Like the Robin Hood script was also bad.
Yeah.
Right. The Kingdom of Heaven was a sort of interesting story, at least, where we ended up loving the director's cut, but then it got butchered down. And yeah, man. And then 1492. Yeah. I think his batting average in these historical films is actually quite low. It's just that into that mix is Gladiator and the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven. So
that's
a
pretty
wash,
much it.
I guess.
I wonder if it's just like, and this is supposition, but it feels like maybe Ridley has a difficult time saying no to projects, because I think you get to a certain echelon and like you make Gladiator, right? And Gladiator is this huge hit, and then everyone says, let's do that more. So we got Robin Hood. Let's gladiatorize Robin Hood. Let's gladiatorize the Exodus story. Let's do these things. Like, Ridley, wouldn't it be great if we did what you did with Gladiator, but did with this ancient thing and this ancient thing? And he's like, yeah, that would be great. Let's do it. Let's do it. And he does. And it's not a good idea, actually.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll figure it out. We'll watch The Martian and everything will become clear again. And we'll be singing the praises of Ridley Scott, the genius director who understands perfectly how to make a compelling movie. And then after that, we go to Alien Covenant and we'll be right back here again.
There's Alien Covenant may be better than this movie, man.
I think that's a fairly safe assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk about it when we get there.
Remember how this is the guy that made Thelma and Louise? You remember that?
I do remember that.
Oh my God. Okay, Ridley Scott. Six to go. We've got 6 more episodes to figure this guy out. Let's hope we get there.
We can do it. I know we can.
We can do it.
Doof.
Okay, Matt, before we go for the week, I wanted to talk to you about some of the crazy things happening over at our good friends at HBO and the Discovery, who now owns Warner Brothers and HBO. So I think we kind of prefaced this earlier with the idea that, Discovery bought Warner Brothers a year, 2 years ago. The AT&T used to own it. AT&T sold it because they weren't making any money off it and said, let's just stay in the internet and mobile phone business and stop trying to make content. So they sold it off at a huge loss. Discovery bought it. And for the long time, there was going to be this conversation about, taking the Discovery Plus suite of streaming stuff and the Warner Brothers suite of streaming stuff, which is largely HBO Max, and combining them into something. And a couple weeks ago, actually just last week, I think it was announced that that's exactly what they're doing. And guess what, Matt?
What?
The new streaming service is going to be called Max.
Yeah. Just Max. It's cleaner.
So we're taking the HBO brand, which, by the way, is one of the most revered brands in television entertainment. And we're just going to get rid of that. Don't need it. We don't need that. We don't need prestige. We don't need any of that. Just Max. Just that's it. Which is also like an interesting issue because it kind of gestures towards the movie channel Cinemax, which is most notably known for softcore porn. Good choice. Good choice, guys.
You know what this reminds me of is when Netflix started to kind of lose the plot like many years ago, and they introduced all of these like secondary brand things like Quickster. Remember Quickster?
I do remember Quickster, and it was immediately abandoned, right?
Yeah, just to remind people, because it's funny. As they were trying to transfer into streaming, they actually had a lot of trouble. It's funny because we don't really think about this now, but there was a period of time when I think a lot of people thought Netflix was on the way out, and this was years ago. And because they were, and they tried to continue their mailing you DVDs business while also transitioning to streaming at the same time, and it was really awkward for them. And I think maybe this was like really early in streaming, and so eventually they like tried to rename their DVD service Quickster, and there was a lot of like thrashing and like reactively changing things and reactively renaming things because they were, that they had their finger in the air. They were trying to navigate by what people were complaining about. It doesn't just remind me of the HBO thing. Doesn't just remind me of Netflix because of the name change, but just the general posture seems to be like a projection of this attitude of we don't really know quite what we're doing. We're going to try different like branding and positioning things to see if that helps, and that never helps. For one thing, like the label you put on a service is not the thing that is actually upstream of anybody's decision.
Yeah, you're so right that like I don't know. I think that the best name is one that like you just hear it and you remember it, but also you don't think about it very much. Like I mean, Disney Plus I think is a remarkable name because it's got the Disney brand in there, and you know what Disney is, and you know what Disney means, and it's that, plus a little more. Apple, like these things, they're effective, they're simple, they work. Like Hulu, I don't even know what that means, but it's just like I've gotten used to it, and so this is Hulu. This is, and then you got like I think we're trying to over-engineer these things, like the NBC one, like Peacock. That's awful, and that service is struggling.
Yeah,
it's just it's stupid, and I mean to give them credit, I think that part of the thinking in the C-suite of the Warner Brothers Discovery offices is there are people out there who maybe see the HBO brand as too prestige and too stuck up and too pretentious for them, and so they won't sign up for a streaming service that perhaps they would if they knew it was more than just HBO. Because what they're trying to do is, trying to expand it beyond just the Sunday night HBO shows that everyone loves. It's like we've got reality TV in here, we've got all this other stuff in here, and it's a whole lot more than just that. And so there is a portion of the potential user base that sees the HBO brand as a negative. I guess that's probably true for some people.
I just can't think of a person sitting there thinking to themselves like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking to sign up for a new streaming service." And I'm looking basically for a bunch of trash that nobody thinks is very good. Like as opposed to you know, they probably do market research or something, but I'm actually
Yeah.
past the point of giving them credit, like, and assuming they know what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm actually at the point where I'm willing to say, I think they're confused about why people sign up for streaming services. I think they're measuring the wrong things. Um, I think they don't know what drives, you know, the decision. I think they don't actually fundamentally understand their own business, to be totally honest with you. I think that these are all people who got into the powerful chairs that they got into in a time where the business looked totally different. And now they're functionally in a different business with different revenue streams that operates differently. The marketing and advertising operates differently. The customer actual purchasing decision operates differently. And they don't know how to they don't know how to think about it. They don't actually have a robust model of why you do or do not have an HBO Max account. They
Yeah.
just don't. And so they're just trying things.
I think you're
And
right.
that's a bad sign, actually.
It is. And I like something someone else pointed out when we read this news was the idea that I don't know if a streaming service called Max is SEO optimized. So
I
it's
just
like,
typed in max.com and it took me to some fake glutathione company is what it
yeah,
is.
because I don't think it's going to be that, but like
Yeah.
type like if you type what's on Hulu, but like type
Yeah.
Max. I think it was our friend Elliot that pointed out one of the streaming services in Australia is called Binge, and like searching what's on Binge is like impossible because that's a word used around television constantly, and I think it has a similar problem to that.
Well,
And it just
I just searched what's on Max and Cinemax movie times showed up. So good job there.
Yeah, I mean, so we will say that like it has not switched over. The app is still called HBO Max right now, so it hasn't switched yet. So maybe if you type "what's on Max" after that, it'll work. I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. Look, 3 years from now, you and I will have forgotten that it was ever called HBO Max.
True.
And it'll be fine. The thing is, there's no reason to do this. There's no positive reason to do it other than just like executives being like, oh shit, I got to justify my paycheck, so I'm gonna change the name of it, and then like if we suddenly get a lot of new listeners, just our viewers just randomly, then I will take credit for that and get a promotion, even though it almost certainly has nothing to do with it. And if we lose a bunch, then I guess I get fired, but I was probably going to get fired anyway.
Yeah, and I'll have a golden parachute and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we talk about the other stupid thing that HBO is doing?
Please.
So, like, first of all, I want to say that HBO just had a really good weekend because the second season of the television show White Lotus just wrapped up on Sunday, which is this, like, incredibly surprising smash hit that HBO has had. Like, the original White Lotus was a show that they basically went to the writer-director Mike White in the middle of the pandemic and were like, we need content. We desperately need content. We know you work very fast and very cheaply. Can you just make us something? And Mike White said, sure. We'll go out to this hotel in Mexico, I think, and we'll all stay there, and so we can like get through the pandemic by quarantining, and then we don't have to worry about anything else after that. After we're all quarantined and we're staying together the whole time. And he wrote the show, and it became this massive smash hit. It wasn't planned to have a follow-up series, but it was so well that they decided to make more of them. And season 2 of that just wrapped up on Sunday. And it's even bigger than season 1 was. So like they just have this huge win. And that same day, they announced that the show's Westworld, and as well as Joss Whedon's The Nevers, which was a show that got a season 1A, and it sounds like season 1B, even though it's filmed and done, will just never premiere anywhere. But both of those shows are just being completely removed from the platform. Like they will no longer exist on HBO Max or whatever it's going to be called. They're just they're HBO shows. They're owned by the company, but they're just not going to be on there anymore. And this isn't the first time they've done it. But I think the news was so big because Westworld's a very popular, relatively new show. And this is one of the things when I signed up for HBO Max, Matt, was I was like, there's not always going to be stuff on there that I want to watch at any given moment. There's not always going to be new stuff on there that I'm interested in. But like HBO has this 3-decade-long back catalog of some of the best, most prestigious television shows ever. And some of them I haven't seen. Like, this is going to be a shocking reveal, but I've never seen Sopranos. I've never watched that show. I wasn't watching it. I didn't have HBO when it was coming out live, and I just haven't had the time to go back and actually watch the show from beginning to end. And I justified my expenditure of this site by the fact that, if there's nothing on one day, maybe I'll sit down and I'll start watching Sopranos. And now suddenly you're telling me that at any given moment, the company can just be like, okay, we're taking this off our site now. And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's flabbergasting.
Yeah. I don't know what's worse, that they don't understand that what you just described, that's the reason why people sign up for streaming services, or that they do understand it, but they don't care. And they would rather, like, they think they're going to make more money off of you by pulling it off of the streaming service and then making you go buy the DVD if you really want to pay for it. Which might even, like, in some cockamamie way make economic sense. But it's like, well, if that's your attitude, then why not just shut down your whole streaming service and just sell everything on DVDs?
Yeah. So to give you a little information, I think the reason they're actually doing this is because they can then sell the rights to stream to someone else. So now they can go to Amazon, let's say, and say, Amazon, would you like to buy the rights to Westworld? Here, give us $10 million and you can stream Westworld on your platform. And they've decided that that's an easy way to make some money, and it would bring them back more value than just having the thing on their streaming service to begin with. Which, sure, I guess, I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I just, I am gonna go back on my if you love something, buy it on disc kick right here, because I think that's just increasingly in this world we're always kind of moving towards this, but it's becoming more and more evident to me. If, like, you have your favorite TV show and your favorite movie or your favorite anything, and it is available on physical media, go buy it. Go buy it, because tomorrow HBO could decide that they could make more money selling the rights to Game of Thrones to some random service that you don't have, and then that service could lose the rights, and then, like, stuff could just go away forever, right? Like Netflix, for example. If Netflix starts doing this, Netflix does not let their stuff even get, like, printed to disc. They don't do that. I think every once in a while they will, like, allow one thing to get on. Like, I think they've made physical copies of, like, Stranger Things, for example. But, like, if Netflix turns around and says, we're done hosting this on our site now, and tries to sell it to the market and nobody buys it, it's just gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. And that's a wild thing to think about. Yeah.
That's it almost feels tragic. I mean, I know it's kind of silly because we're talking about, like, entertainment, but it's like, it feels like we've regressed as a society is what it feels like, because it feels like we had a really functional system and now we don't anymore. And it's I don't know what I'm trying to say here exactly, but it's like, I do have some sympathy for their position, because, like, I'm thinking about Raised by Wolves, which I love, and it's a cult popular thing, right? Like, you don't even like it that much. I love it.
A cult of one human being.
A cult of one. But, like, this is exactly the kind of thing where a smaller group of people are really passionate about it. And in the old world, in the before times, people like me would go buy the Blu-ray of Raised by Wolves. Maybe I would never even watch it, but then I would at least know that, like, I had Raised by Wolves, and it would be the kind of thing that, like, a fan would do. But there's no way I would buy Raised by Wolves I mean, maybe now I will, now that people are pulling stuff off of services. but like you know, normally speaking, I would never buy Raised by Wolves because I know I can just go watch it on Amazon
Uh-huh.
Anytime I want, which I'm already paying for. So that's an interesting kind of almost trap they've opened themselves up to, where there's a bunch of DVDs that I would have bought if it weren't for these streaming services.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, does that mean they're actually leaving money on the table? I don't actually know. I don't know how the economics of that work out.
One thing I don't know is in the modern world of DVD, Blu-ray sales, like how many sales do they need to make that print run worth the expenditure, right? I don't know. Is it a few thousand? Is it tens of thousands? Like what's the actual number here? Because there's not, I mean, there's definitely, like, there exists in this thing a very niche market of hardcore, disc collectors, of which I less so in the last couple of years, but definitely a few years ago was one of them, where I would like obsessively collect all the movies I liked that came out each year. And in the years past, I have a giant shelf with hundreds of DVDs on it. There's definitely a market for those people, but like, how many of those people need to exist to making a Blu-ray worth it? I don't know.
You were the kind of person who was keeping the Blu-ray industry in business, of course.
Definitely. Yeah.
But
and they're freaking out because I've definitely right around the time of the pandemic, I just like stopped buying them, and I really haven't. Like, I get gifted some at Christmas and my birthday every year, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess the upshot of this conversation is I got to go buy the Raised by Wolves Blu-ray, because
if it exists, does it exist, Matt?
There are season 1 and season 2 Blu-rays. Yes,
that's a HBO Max show, and they typically do still do a run of all their original shows, so that doesn't surprise me too much. It's Netflix that's really against this. I don't know like what Prime and the rest of them do, but I know Netflix is the big one that does not do any of it.
Yeah,
because I know Mike Flanagan like really wanted a Haunting of Hill House Blu-ray, and they just refused.
Isn't that so strange, right? Because I just you got to figure that they'll make money on that, right? Like I know you just pointed out, like, there's some sort of setup costs to making a run of DVDs, but I'm like, I don't know, man. This where we are in. I mean, yes, of course you're right that there are setup costs, but they're going to make their money back.
It's so cheap these days, right?
Yeah. It's so cheap. And then you just make them and you just sell them until you've sold out, and it might take a while, but you're going to make the money back. And that, that's the kind of thing that in the old days people used to understand, that that's just an opportunity to put a big old Netflix logo in people's house that they get to see every time they look at that DVD.
Yeah,
like it's your that's how these things work, and that's how they've always worked. That's yeah.
While you were talking, I happened to look up The Haunting of Hill House on Amazon, and there is a $50 extended director's cut Blu-ray of this entire show, and I'm buying it right. It's 10 days to Christmas, and I don't care. I'm buying it for myself right now as we speak.
Nice.
Done. Purchased. It'll be here tomorrow. So I guess I should amend my statement that Netflix is usually against this kind of thing. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think it's frustrating. I think, in this world of, people talked about like you don't really own things when it's digital. The idea that I think the idea that you're teaching your consumers that when you are investing in a monthly fee in a streaming service, the things that you have access to are transient, actually, is a bad lesson to teach people, because you're teaching them that maybe my subscription will be as well. Maybe I don't need to maintain this subscription. Like the idea that Disney Plus shows have done okay, right? But the reason the majority of the people are staying subscribed to Disney Plus month after month after month is because it has this giant backlog of incredibly popular animated features, on the Pixar side and on the Disney animation side, right? This idea that at any moment in any day, I could go watch The Little Mermaid or The Lion King or Cinderella. That is what people stay subscribed to these services for. And if you tell someone, like, if Disney chooses to like bring back the vault, for example, like, do you remember the Disney Vault? Do you remember
Yes.
this?
Yes.
How Disney like artificially inflated the demand for their original things by just every once in a while just saying, oh, the Great Mouse Detective's going back in the vault, and we will not make any more VHSs of that movie for the next 5 years. So get it now. And they would do this thing all the time. If they decide to bring that back in a digital market and just say like, sorry, folks, The Lion King's going back in the vault. You can't watch it on Disney Plus until we decide randomly to bring it back because it's just ones and zeros and we're just flicking a switch and it's meaningless. If they decide to do that, I think that would be a bad call. I think that would hurt their retention of subscriptions. And I think they know that. And for HBO/Discovery not to know that, that's not good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I already feel weird about all the Disney stuff because like I think I said this before. I wanted to show my children all of the Disney films, all the classic animated films, but they made it so difficult for me to get those films back when my kids were little.
Yeah,
that we basically, I think there are classic Disney animated films that my kids either haven't seen or maybe have only seen once, just because they just made it difficult. And it's like, wow, you've shot yourselves in the foot. You know, just make it easy, and then you have lifelong fans, right? You have lifelong dedicated fans. I don't know. Really weird decisions being made. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. They should hire us. Ridley Scott and these companies should hire us as consultants.
All right, so we've got 2 projects we need to work on, Matt. We've got 90-minute films, which for those of you who are not patrons missed our discussion of Cujo and how Matt and I are going to start a film production company called 90-minute films, in which we produce only 90-minute films.
Right.
And we're also going to open a consulting service in which we tell everyone how to fix all their entertainment-related problems. And do we have any experience in the entertainment industry? No, we do not. But are we right?
Definitely.
Maybe. And
maybe
you're going to roll the dice on that. Our rate is $300 an hour.
I mean, you can't do worse than what you're doing right now, folks. So
yeah, just shoot Matt and Scott an email and say, all right, folks, we're thinking about dropping the HBO and just calling it Max. And you know what I would do? Control-N, new, president at HBO.com. And I would write, no, bad. And I would say, thanks. And I would hit send.
And then you send the invoice.
Yeah.
And then, there you go.
Are we going to come up with better ideas? No. We're the ones that tell you when the idea is bad.
Yeah.
Just come to us with all your ideas and we'll filter them into bad and less bad.
That's actually a good idea. Yeah. They should just come up with a lot more ideas and then not do the dumb ones. And then that would actually work really, really well for them, I think.
Yeah. Let me tell you what I've learned in my 37 years of existence.
What?
Don't do the bad ones.
Yeah. I've also learned that lesson.
Yeah. You heard it here first. All right, Matt, are you ready? You ready to wrap this thing up?
I am.
That's all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Exodus, Gods and Kings, or on the confounding nature of Ridley Scott, or on our Nobody Knows What They're Doing segment on HBO/Max/Westworld will no longer be viewable anymore, let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter at doofmedia. You can also, of course, chat with us on Reddit. That's r/doofmedia, where there will be a post for this episode where you can talk all about what you think.
That's right. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to click that button and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media, where every month we will give you one free us telling you if your idea is bad or not. Shoot us that idea, and patrons will let you know.
That's a good idea. Start small. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we'd also really appreciate it if you'd give the Doofcast a rating and or review over on Apple Podcasts. Every review does help us to get more exposure and it introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. All right, Matt. I think we're going to try, and this is contingent on the fact that we're not sure if we're both going to get to see the movie before next week, but we're going to try to next week talk about Avatar.
That's right.
The new Jim Cameron film, Avatar, The Way of Water. Is that what it's called? I forgot for a second there. Avatar, The Way of Water comes out the day this here podcast episode is released. Matt and I are going to try to watch it over the weekend. And then if so, we will have an episode next week on Avatar. Oh, I'm so excited.
I am too. I really hope we get a chance to watch it this weekend so we can talk about that. That'll be great.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's it. We're done. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah. Happy the beginning of the holiday season, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe go buy a DVD copy of your favorite television show because you don't know if it's going to be around.
Support your creators by buying the DVD.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.